Chapter 4, in which Sancho Panza gives a satisfactory reply to the doubts and questions of the bachelor Samson Carrasco, together with other matters worth knowing and telling. Sancho came back to Don Quixote's house, and returning to the late subject of conversation, he said, "As to what Señor Samson said, that he would like to know by whom or how or when my ass was stolen, I say in reply that the same night we went into the Sierra Morena, flying from the Holy Brotherhood after that unlucky adventure of the galley slaves, and the other of the corpse that was going to Segovia, my master and I ensconced ourselves in a thicket, and there, my master leaning on his lance, and I seated on my dapple, battered and weary with the late frays, we fell asleep as if it had been on 4 feather mattresses, and I in particular slept so sound that, whoever he was able to come and prop me up on 4 stakes, which he put under the 4 corners of the pack saddle, in such a way that he left me mounted on it, and took away dapple from under me without my feeling it." "That is an easy matter," said Don Quixote, "and it is no new occurrence, for the same thing happened to Sacripante at the siege of Albraca. The famous thief Brunello, by the same contrivance, took his horse from between his legs." "They came," continued Sancho, "and the moment I stirred the stakes gave way, and I fell to the ground with a mighty come down. I looked about for the ass, but could not see him. The tears rushed to my eyes, and I raised such a lamentation that, if the author of our history has not put it in, he may depend on it, he has left out a good thing. Some days after, I know not how many, travelling with her ladyship the Princess Micomicona, I saw my ass, and mounted upon him, in the dress of a Roma, was that Gines de Pasamonte, the great rogue and rascal that my master and I freed from the chain." "That is not where the mistake is," replied Samson. "It is that before the ass has turned up, the author speaks of Sancho as being mounted on it." "I don't know what to say to that," said Sancho, "unless that the historian made a mistake, or perhaps it might be a blunder of the printers." "No doubt that's it," said Samson. "But what became of the 100 crowns? Did they vanish?" To which Sancho answered, "I spent them for my own good, and my wife's, and my children's, and it is they that have made my wife bear so patiently all my wanderings on highways and byways in the service of my master Don Quixote. For if after all this time I had come back to the house without a wrap and without the ass, it would have been a poor lookout for me. And if anyone wants to know anything more about me, here I am, ready to answer the king himself in person, and it is no affair of anyone's whether I took or did not take, whether I spent or did not spend. For the whacks that were given me in these journeys were to be paid for in money, even if they were valued at no more than 4 maravedis apiece. Another 100 crowns would not pay me for half of them. Let each look to himself, and not try to make out white black and black white, for each of us is as God made him, aye, and often worse." "I will take care," said Carrasco, "to impress upon the author of the history that, if he prints it again, he must not forget what worthy Sancho has said, for it will raise it a good span higher." "Is there anything else to correct in the history, Señor Bachelor?" asked Don Quixote. "No doubt there is," replied he, "but not anything that will be of the same importance as those I have mentioned." "Does the author promise a second part at all?" said Don Quixote. "He does promise one," replied Samson, "but he says he has not found it, nor does he know who has got it, and we cannot say whether it will appear or not, and so, on that head, as some say that no second part has ever been good, and others that enough has been already written about Don Quixote, it is thought there will be no second part, though some who are jovial rather than saturnine say, 'Let us have more Quixotades, let Don Quixote charge and Sancho chatter, and no matter what it may turn out, we shall be satisfied with that.'" "And what does the author mean to do?" said Don Quixote. "What?" replied Samson. Why, as soon as he has found the history which he is now searching for with extraordinary diligence, he will at once give it to the press, moved more by the profit that may accrue to him from doing so than by any thought of praise. Whereat Sancho observed, "The author looks for money and profit, does he? It will be a wonder if he succeeds, for it will be only hurry, hurry with him, like the tailor on Easter Eve, and works done in a hurry are never finished as perfectly as they ought to be. Let Master Moore, or whatever he is, pay attention to what he is doing, and I and my master will give him as much grouting ready to his hand in the way of adventures and accidents of all sorts as would make up not only 1/2 part, but 100. The good man fancies, no doubt, that we are fast asleep in the straw here, but let him hold up our feet to be shod, and he will see which foot it is we go out lame on. All I say is, that if my master would take my advice, we would be now afield, redressing outrages and righting wrongs, as is the use and custom of good knights errant." Sancho had hardly uttered these words when the neighing of Rocinante fell upon their ears, which neighing Don Quixote accepted as a happy omen, and he resolved to make another sally in 3 or 4 days from that time. Announcing his intention to the bachelor, he asked his advice as to the quarter in which he ought to commence his expedition, and the bachelor replied that in his opinion he ought to go to the kingdom of Aragon and the city of Saragossa, where there were to be certain solemn joustings at the festival of St. George, at which he might win renown above all the knights of Aragon, which would be winning it above all the knights of the world. He commended his very praiseworthy and gallant resolution, but admonished him to proceed with greater caution in encountering dangers, because his life did not belong to him, but to all those who had need of him to protect and aid them in their misfortunes. "There's where it is, what I abominate, Señor Samson," said Sancho here. "My master will attack 100 armed men as a greedy boy would 6 melons. Body of the world, Señor Bachelor, there is a time to attack and a time to retreat, and it is not to be always Santiago and close Spain. Moreover, I have heard it said, and I think by my master himself, if I remember rightly, that the mean of valor lies between the extremes of cowardice and rashness, and if that be so, I don't want him to fly without having good reason, or to attack when the odds make it better not. But above all things, I warn my master that if he is to take me with him, it must be on the condition that he is to do all the fighting, and that I am not to be called upon to do anything except what concerns keeping him clean and comfortable. In this I will dance attendance on him readily, but to expect me to draw sword, even against rascally churls of the hatchet and hood, is idle. I don't set up to be a fighting man, Señor Samson, but only the best and most loyal squire that ever served knight-errant, and if my master Don Quixote, in consideration of my many faithful services, is pleased to give me some island of the many his worship says one may stumble on in these parts, I will take it as a great favor, and if he does not give it to me, I was born like everyone else, and a man must not live in dependence on anyone except God. And what is more, my bread will taste as well, and perhaps even better, without a government than if I were a governor. And how do I know but that in these governments the devil may have prepared some trip for me, to make me lose my footing and fall and knock my grinders out? Sancho I was born, and Sancho I mean to die. But for all that, if heaven were to make me a fair offer of an island or something else of the kind, without much trouble and without much risk, I am not such a fool as to refuse it, for they say too, when they offer thee a heifer, run with a halter, and when good luck comes to thee, take it in." "Brother Sancho," said Carrasco, "you have spoken like a professor, but for all that, put your trust in God and in Señor Don Quixote, for he will give you a kingdom, not to say an island." "It is all the same, be it more or be it less," replied Sancho, "though I can tell Señor Carrasco that my master would not throw the kingdom he might give me into a sack all in holes, for I have felt my own pulse, and I find myself sound enough to rule kingdoms and govern islands, and I have before now told my master as such. And I have before now told my master as much. Take care, Sancho, said Samson. Honors change manners, and perhaps when you find yourself a governor you won't know the mother that bore you. That may hold good of those that are born in the ditches, said Sancho. Not of those who have the fat of an old Christian 4 fingers deep on their souls, as I have. Nay, only look at my disposition. Is that likely to show ingratitude to anyone? God grant it, said Don Quixote. We shall see when the government comes, and I seem to see it already. He then begged the bachelor, if he were a poet, to do him the favour of composing some verses for him, conveying the farewell he meant to take of his lady Dulcinea del Toboso, and to see that a letter of her name was placed at the beginning of each line, so that, at the end of the verses, Dulcinea del Toboso might be read by putting together the first letters. The bachelor replied that although he was not one of the famous poets of Spain who were, they said, only 3 1/2, he would not fail to compose the required verses, though he saw a great difficulty in the task, as the letters which made up the name were 17. So if he made 4 ballad stanzas of 4 lines each, there would be a letter over, and if he made them of 5, what they called decimas or redondillas, there were 3 letters short. Nevertheless, he would try to drop a letter as well as he could, so that the name Dulcinea del Toboso might be got into 4 ballad stanzas. It must be by some means or other, said Don Quixote, for unless the name stands there plain and manifest, no woman would believe the verses were made for her. They agreed upon this, and that the departure should take place in 3 days from that time. Don Quixote charged the bachelor to keep it a secret, especially from the curate and Master Nicholas, and from his niece and the housekeeper, lest they should prevent the execution of his praiseworthy and valiant purpose. Carrasco promised all, and then took his leave, charging Don Quixote to inform him of his good or evil fortunes whenever he had an opportunity. And thus they bade each other farewell, and Sancho went away to make the necessary preparations for their expedition. Brunello by the same contrivance took his horse from between his legs. La sella su 4 astegli sufolse, e di sotto il destrier nudo gli tolse. Orlando Furioso, 2784. But the idea was Boiardo's. E la cinghia disciolse presto presto, e pose il legno sotto de lo arsione. Orlando Innamorato, 2, verse 40. It seems plain from this that Cervantes meant to introduce into the first part a burlesque of the theft of Sacripante's horse, with Gines de Pasamonte playing the part of Brunello. It would have been an incident exactly in the spirit of the book. Each of us is as God made him, aye, and often worse. Proverb 80. I and my master will give him as much grouting. Ripio, small stones and mortar used in building to fill the interstices between the large stones. Solemn joustings at the festival of St. George. In commemoration of the Battle of Alcoraz, where in 1096 Pedro I of Aragon, with the help of St. George, defeated the Moors. Santiago and close Spain. The old Spanish war cry, Santiago y Sierra España. To attack, win the odds. Demacia, literally excess. Hartzenbusch would add of the risk or substitute occasion, but I venture to think the word by itself may be taken in the sense I have given. When good luck comes to thee, take it in. Proverbs 236 and 22. Honors change manners. Proverb 158. That may hold good of those that are born in the ditches, said Sancho. Literally, among the mallows. Only 3.5. There is some difference of opinion as to who were the 3 poets and a half allowed to be famous by Samson Carrasco, but probably Cervantes only intended a malicious little joke at the expense of the whole swarm of poets of his day and their mutual admiration cliques. What they call decimas or redondillas. The decima is properly a stanza of 10 8-syllable lines. In the redondilla, which is more commonly a 4-line stanza, the last line rhymes with the first. The acrostic was one of the poetical frivolities of the day.